There is a specific kind of surprise that comes only to the side that wins a fight nobody believed it could win. Not the surprise of the underdog who gets lucky, not the relief of the man who survives by chance. Something different, the specific, disorienting experience of discovering that the enemy the world told you to fear is not, in fact, what the world said it was, that the army sent to destroy you is not as fearsome as its reputation, that the soldiers who marched into your country with the confidence of men who expected to be home in 2 weeks are, when you meet them face to face in the mountains, something considerably less than what the propaganda promised. Greek soldiers in the winter of 1940 and 1941 know this feeling better than almost any other soldiers in the Second World War. They know it because they lived it, because they went into the mountains of Albania expecting to fight the army of a modern European power and found something that surprised them in a way that nobody outside Greece fully understood at the time, and that history has never quite captured properly since. What they found was not a fearsome enemy. What they found, documented in letters home, in diaries, in the accounts of officers and enlisted men, preserved in archives that English-language history has largely ignored, produced an emotion that nobody expected from soldiers who had just survived an invasion of their own country. They felt sorry for the Italians. Not all of them. Not immediately. Not without the rage and the grief and the fierce pride of men who had answered a simple no to an ultimatum delivered at 3 in the morning and then gone to the mountains to make that answer stick. But underneath all of that, documented in the private words of the men who were actually there, in the letters they wrote home, in the accounts they gave after the war, in the testimony that historians have gathered from the survivors, there is this specific, unexpected emotion. Pity. An elderly Greek woman watching 26,000 Italian prisoners march past her village says it first and says it most simply, "I feel sorry for them. They are not warriors. They should carry mandolins instead of rifles." She is not alone. The men who captured those prisoners, who fought the battles that produced them, who chased the Italian army back across the Albanian mountains in the worst winter in decades. Those men write home with the same feeling, expressed in different words, in the specific language of soldiers who have looked their enemy in the eye and found something they didn't expect to find. This is their story, and it begins with a man who understood, before anyone else, what his army was capable of, and what the army sent to destroy it was not. Alexandros Papagos is 56 years old on October 28, 1940, the morning that Italy's ultimatum expires, and Greece finds itself at war. He is the commander-in-chief of the Hellenic Army, the highest military position in the Greek armed forces, a career soldier who has served through the Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913, through the catastrophic Greek campaign in Asia Minor in the early 1920s, through the political upheavals of the 1930s that brought Metaxas to power and restructured the Greek military around a specific vision of what the army should be and how it should fight. He is not a flashy commander. He is not a man who generates memorable quotes in the heat of battle or plays to the gallery of international press correspondents. He is methodical, precise, demanding, and possessed of a quality that proves essential in the weeks after October 28th. A clear-eyed professional assessment of what his army can actually do, based on years of first-hand knowledge of the men and the terrain and the conditions they are about to face. What Papagos knows about his army in October 1940 is this: it is not equipped for a modern European war. The weapons are a generation old. The boots issued to soldiers mobilizing for the Albanian front in October 1940 are not designed for the mountain winter they are about to face. The supply chain is improvising in real time. The artillery is outranged by Italian equivalents. The Air Force is outclassed by Italian aircraft on almost every technical measure. What he also knows, and what the Italians, for all their intelligence assessments, do not fully understand, is that the Greek soldier fighting in the mountains of Epirus and Macedonia is fighting on terrain he knows, for a cause that is personal in a way that professional military service rarely is, with a motivation that does not appear in any order of battle assessment and cannot be quantified in any intelligence report. He is fighting for his village, for his family, for the specific patch of Greek earth that is his in the way that only birthright can create. The Italian soldier, advancing through Albania in October 1940, is fighting because Mussolini told him to, and the military machine he belongs to has pointed him in a direction and told him to walk. The Greek soldier, waiting in the mountains, is fighting because someone came to his home and told him it now belonged to Italy, and his answer to that proposition is the same answer his prime minister gave at 3 in the morning. No. That difference, invisible in any intelligence document, impossible to quantify in any military assessment, is what Papagos is working with when he begins planning the Greek response to the Italian invasion. The Italian plan for the conquest of Greece is built on a specific set of assumptions. The Greek army is small and poorly equipped. Greek morale will crack under the pressure of a modern military offensive. The political situation in Greece is unstable enough that a swift, decisive Italian advance will produce a collapse of will before a collapse of forces. The whole thing should be over in 2 weeks. Mussolini says so. Ciano, his son-in-law and foreign minister, writes in his diary that the operation will be quick and that Greece will fall before winter. The assumptions are wrong, all of them. But they are wrong in a way that only becomes apparent once the fighting starts. And by then, the Italian army is already in trouble. The invasion begins at 5:30 a.m. on October 28, 1940, with Italian columns crossing from Albania into Greece along multiple axes. The terrain immediately begins working against them. The mountains of Epirus and northwestern Greece are not the flat plains of Eastern Europe, where Italian forces had imagined lightning advances. They are steep, narrow, cold, and crossed by paths that barely qualify as roads, where artillery has to be manhandled over ridgelines and supply columns move at the pace of the slowest mule. The Italian commanders who have been told to be in Athens in 2 weeks are looking at the geography and beginning to understand that the geography was not briefed. The Greek forces meeting them are already in position. Papagos has been quietly preparing for exactly this scenario since at least 1939, when Italy occupied Albania and the strategic situation on Greece's northwestern border changed permanently. He has not been mobilizing openly. The political situation is too delicate for that, and Metaxas has been trying to maintain Greek neutrality for as long as possible. But the preparation has been happening. The units assigned to the Albanian front know the terrain. Their commanders have been studying the likely Italian axes of advance. When the attack comes, the Greek army is not caught entirely unprepared. It is caught under-equipped and outnumbered. But it is not surprised. Within 2 weeks of the invasion, the Italian advance has stalled. Not slowed, stalled. The Greek defensive positions on the key mountain approaches have held against attacks that Italian commanders expected to sweep them aside. The Greek soldier in his mountain position, in his inadequate boots, with his older weapons and his improvised supply line, is doing something that the Italian professional military assessment said he could not do for more than a few days. He is holding. And then, on November 14th, 1940, 17 days after the Italian invasion began, 17 days after Mussolini's commanders expected to be celebrating in Athens, Papagos orders the counteroffensive. The Greek counteroffensive of November 1940 is one of the most complete military reversals of the entire Second World War, and one of the least known outside of Greece. It begins in the mountains of Epirus, where Greek divisions that have been holding their positions against Italian attacks for 2 weeks suddenly stop defending and start advancing. The movement catches the Italian command at every level by surprise. Not because intelligence has failed to detect Greek preparations, but because the Italian professional assessment has not fully processed the possibility that the Greeks would attack at all. The logic of the situation, as Italian commanders understand it, is that a smaller, poorly equipped army defending against a larger, better equipped one does not counterattack. It holds if it can and retreats when it can't. It does not, 2 weeks into an invasion that was supposed to be over by now, push back. The Greeks push back. The advance moves through terrain that military doctrine says cannot support an offensive in November. The mountain paths are ice-covered. The temperature at altitude is well below freezing. The supply situation for the advancing Greek units is a logistical improvisation of staggering complexity. Mules carrying ammunition over passes that wheeled vehicles cannot navigate. Supply officers inventing solutions to problems that no planning document anticipated because no planning document contemplated an offensive at this time of year in these mountains. Greek soldiers are advancing in boots that were not designed for this winter, over ground that is trying to kill them independent of anything the Italians are doing, toward positions that professional military assessment says should be held easily by a defending force with better equipment. They take those positions anyway. The battle cry that carries them forward is error, a single word that translates imperfectly as air or wind or spirit, a word that captures something about the forward momentum of men who have decided that the terrain and the cold and the equipment deficit are problems to be solved rather than reasons to stop. Greek soldiers roaring error as they go over ridgelines in the Albanian winter are expressing something that cannot be reduced to military doctrine or tactical analysis. They are expressing the specific fury of people defending something that is theirs in a way that goes deeper than national identity or political allegiance. By December 5th, 1940, 5 weeks after the Italian invasion began, 5 weeks after Mussolini promised his commanders would be in Athens, the Greeks have pushed the Italian army back 50 miles and have penetrated 30 miles into Italian-held Albanian territory. The first Allied land victory of the entire Second World War has been achieved by an army that the Italian professional military assessment gave 2 weeks of serious resistance before collapse. The Italian prisoners begin arriving in Greek-held territory in numbers that nobody has planned for. 26,000 of them by the end of the campaign. 26,000 Italian soldiers captured by an army that was supposed to have surrendered to them. They are marched through Greek villages on their way to prisoner-of-war facilities, past the families of the men who have just beaten them, past old women sitting in doorways watching the column go by. It is one of those old women. Her name is not recorded. Her village is not specified in the accounts that preserve her words, who says what the Greek army has been feeling for weeks, but has not yet articulated so cleanly. I feel sorry for them. They are not warriors. They should carry mandolins instead of rifles. Her words spread. They are quoted in international press accounts of the campaign. They appear in the letters that Greek soldiers write home in the weeks after the counteroffensive begins. They capture something that the official military communiques and the strategic assessments and the diplomatic cables are not designed to express: the specific emotional texture of what it feels like to beat an enemy you were supposed to fear and find that the fear was misplaced. What Greek soldiers actually write home about the Italians they are fighting is not what you would expect from soldiers in the middle of a war. The letters that survive in Greek archives from the Albanian front in the winter of 1940 and 1941 are full of observations about the enemy that carry more wonder than hatred, more pity than contempt. One soldier writes to his nephew, "We are winning. I will bring you an Italian as I promised, for you to keep him in the yard." The humor in the line, treating an Italian prisoner of war like a souvenir, like something curious and slightly absurd, tells you more about the Greek experience of fighting the Italian army than any tactical analysis could. Another soldier, writing to his wife, describes capturing an Italian position and finding the men inside it, not fighting with desperate determination, but sitting in confusion, cold, underfed, uncertain about what they are doing in these mountains and why their commanders told them this would be easy. The Greek soldier does not describe his enemy with the language of military respect. He describes them with the language of someone who has encountered something unexpected, not fierce resistance that he has overcome, but something closer to collapse that he has walked into. The professional military assessment of what the Italian army was supposed to be does not match what Greek soldiers are finding in the Albanian mountains. The equipment is there. The artillery is there. The air support is there. What is not there in the accounts that Greek soldiers send home is the will that makes all of that equipment mean something. Papagos, reading the situation reports from his commanders, understands what he is seeing. The Italian army is not broken by Greek firepower. It is broken by something that the intelligence assessments never measured: the specific demoralization of an army that has been told a campaign will be easy and has discovered, in the mountains of Albania, in the worst winter in decades, that it is not easy at all, and that the men who are making it hard were supposed to collapse weeks ago. He presses the advantage. January 1941. The Greek advance continues. Mussolini, watching his campaign turn into something he never imagined, his army retreating before an enemy he promised Rome would be defeated in days, calls in his ambassador to Germany on December 4th, 1940, face unshaven and eyes swollen by one account, and asks Hitler for help. Hitler, who had not planned to intervene in the Balkans at this stage, begins making plans that will eventually become Operation Marita, the German invasion of Greece, in April 1941, that will end the Greek campaign not because Greece has been defeated, but because Germany is a different problem entirely. But in January and February 1941, that intervention has not yet come. The Greek army is still advancing, and the accounts from the front lines are still producing the same unexpected emotional register. Not triumph exactly, not the savage satisfaction of an army that has destroyed a feared enemy, but something quieter and more complicated: pity, mixed with pride, mixed with exhaustion, mixed with the dark humor of men who have been cold for months, and are still cold, and have discovered that the army they were cold fighting is colder than they are, in every sense of the word. The Italian Spring Offensive of March 1941, Mussolini's last attempt to salvage something from the campaign before German intervention makes the Greek position untenable, is personally directed by Mussolini himself, who flies to Albania to command the operation. He brings with him the younger members of his government, including Ciano, who records the experience in his diary with the specific misery of a man who has been sent to a front that is clearly not going the way Rome intended. The offensive fails. Greek positions that Italian commanders have been told will fall under the weight of the assault hold. Mussolini, who arrived in Albania expecting to personally oversee a victory that would redeem the campaign, watches instead as his forces fail to achieve the breakthrough that was supposed to make the previous months look like successful preparation rather than catastrophic miscalculation. Ciano's diary entries from this period document the Italian experience from the inside with an honesty that official communiques never permit. Again, a bad withdrawal in Albania, he writes, in December 1940. The Siena division was broken to pieces by a Greek attack. The usual story in Albania, and this displeases the Duce. The entries keep coming, week after week, each one a variation on the same theme. Italy went to conquer Greece, and Greece is not cooperating. By the time German forces finally intervene in April 1941, the Greco-Italian War has run for more than 5 months. Greece has not been conquered by Italy. The first Allied land victory of the war has been achieved and held for 6 months against an Italian army that had every material advantage. 26,000 Italian prisoners are in Greek hands, and the men who captured them have been writing home for months about an enemy that surprised them not with its ferocity, but with its absence of it. On this channel, we've told you what Italian soldiers said when they faced Greeks. The shock, the professional humiliation, the reports their commanders tried to bury. We've told you what German soldiers said. Both times, the answer was the same. Today, you've heard from the Greeks themselves, and the answer, as it turns out, is the one nobody expected. They felt sorry for the men who came to destroy them. That is the specific texture of what happened in the Albanian mountains in the winter of 1940 and 1941. Not the heroic narrative of warriors overcoming impossible odds, though that narrative is also true. The human texture of soldiers who went to fight a fearsome enemy and found something considerably less than fearsome and responded to that discovery with the specific grace of people who understood, without being told, that the men on the other side of the mountain were not evil. They were just wrong. Wrong about what they were doing. Wrong about who they were fighting. Wrong about how easy this was going to be. If this story is connecting with you, if you're thinking about what it means to defeat an enemy with pity rather than hatred, that subscribe button and that like button are how you say so. This channel exists for exactly this kind of story. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The strategic consequences of the Greek victory over Italy in the winter of 1940 and 1941 extend far beyond the Albanian front and the 26,000 prisoners marching through Greek villages. The most significant consequence, documented in German military planning documents and confirmed by post-war historical analysis, is the delay it imposes on Operation Barbarossa, the German invasion of the Soviet Union. Hitler's original planning for Barbarossa sets the invasion date for May 15, 1941. The need to intervene in Greece to rescue the Italian campaign, to prevent a complete Italian collapse that would expose Germany's southern flank, forces a postponement. Operation Marita, the German invasion of Greece, begins on April 6, 1941. The subsequent campaign, including the Battle of Crete, runs until late May. Barbarossa is delayed approximately 5 to 6 weeks, eventually launching on June 22, 1941. Those 5 to 6 weeks matter. The debate among historians about whether the Greek campaign's delay of Barbarossa cost Germany the chance to capture Moscow before the Russian winter is one of the most examined counterfactuals of the entire war. The consensus is not unanimous, but the argument that Greece's resistance, the resistance that began with an elderly woman's pity for Italian prisoners and a counteroffensive that military doctrine said could not happen, contributed to the timing that ultimately proved fatal to Germany's Russian campaign, is one that serious historians have taken seriously for 80 years. Joseph Stalin, speaking on Moscow radio on January 31, 1943, after the Soviet victory at Stalingrad, acknowledges it directly. "I am sorry because I am getting old, and I shall not live long to thank the Greek people whose resistance decided World War II." The statement is reported, debated, and preserved. Coming from Stalin, in the context of Stalingrad, it is not a diplomatic courtesy. It is a professional military assessment from the man who had the most direct experience of what the timing of Barbarossa meant for the Soviet Union. Winston Churchill, speaking in the House of Commons on April 24, 1941, puts it differently. "Until now, we used to say that the Greeks fight like heroes. Now we shall say, heroes fight like Greeks." The specific reversal in Churchill's formulation, not that Greeks are brave like heroes, but that heroes aspire to the standard set by Greeks, is the kind of rhetorical precision that Churchill reserved for moments he considered genuinely significant. Adolf Hitler, in the aftermath of the campaign, reportedly acknowledges that he had never faced a more courageous adversary. The man who ordered the invasion of Greece to rescue his Italian ally pays the Greek army a professional compliment that is more revealing than most of what his official communications contain. All of these assessments, Stalin's, Churchill's, Hitler's, converge on the same conclusion. What happened in the Albanian mountains in the winter of 1940 and 1941 mattered, not just for Greece, for the entire trajectory of the war. Alexandros Papagos does not surrender when Germany overruns Greece in April 1941. He remains behind as the government and the king go into exile, organizes resistance among Greek officers, and is eventually arrested by the German occupiers in 1943. He is sent to Dachau concentration camp, where he remains until American forces liberate the camp in 1945. The man who directed the first Allied land victory of the Second World War spends the middle years of the war in a German concentration camp. He is liberated in 1945, returns to Greece, and eventually leads the Greek army in the civil war that follows the occupation's end. In 1949, Time magazine puts him on its cover, Commander of the Greeks, the caption reads, and in 1952, he becomes Prime Minister of Greece, a position he holds until his death in 1955. The 26,000 Italian prisoners captured during the Albanian campaign are eventually repatriated. Some of them, interviewed in later years about their experience, describe the Greek soldiers who captured them with a consistency that mirrors what the Greek soldiers wrote home about them. As men who were surprised, who treated their prisoners with a basic human decency that the circumstances of war did not require, who seemed more curious than hostile. The symmetry of the two accounts, Greek soldiers writing home that they felt sorry for the Italians, Italian prisoners remembering that their captors seemed almost apologetic, says something about what the Albanian campaign actually was at the human level beneath the strategic analysis. Mussolini never drinks coffee in Athens. The phrase becomes a Greek expression, a shorthand for the specific failure of overconfidence, for the gap between what a powerful man promises and what reality delivers. He promised Rome that Greece would fall in 2 weeks. He flew to Albania to personally command the offensive that was supposed to redeem the campaign. He watched it fail from a hilltop in Albania and flew home to face questions he did not have good answers to, and eventually faced consequences for the entire arc of his miscalculation that went well beyond the Albanian front. The mountains where the campaign was fought are still there. The paths that Greek soldiers climbed in inadequate boots in the winter of 1940 are still there, or have been reclaimed by the terrain that was always indifferent to the armies moving across it. The villages where the Italian prisoners marched past old women who felt sorry for them are still there. The letter that said, "I will bring you an Italian, as I promised, for you to keep him in the yard," is in an archive in Athens, next to thousands of other letters that document what Greek soldiers actually experienced in those months. The cold, the exhaustion, the pride, and the specific, unexpected pity for an enemy that came to destroy them and turned out to be something considerably less than what the propaganda promised. They went to fight warriors and found men carrying mandolins. This story survived wars, decades, and the indifference of institutions that should have preserved it. It survived to reach you. That like button makes sure it travels further. These stories travel a long road to reach you: Greek archives, military records, first-hand accounts, verification, narration. Subscribe so the road keeps getting traveled. Where are you watching from? Some of you are watching from the same countries, the same cities, sometimes even the same towns where this happened. Drop your location below. Thank you for being the final destination of a story that traveled a long way to find you. Alexandros Papagos and the men of the Albanian front started it. You finished it.